The enslavement of African Americans led to a huge and bloody war known as the American Civil War, fought between the northern states and the southern states in America. How did this 4-year war with more than 200 battles shape our entire world? Find out in the latest episode of Explained, History of the American Civil War, Part 1. Please keep watching until the end to find out what made the Civil War one of the most intense and bloody wars of all time. In case you didn't know, a civil war is fought within a country. If that sounds like a bad idea, well, that's because it is. But in the case of the American Civil War, this fight was overdue. The reasons for this war piled up, and it was only time before an explosion occurred. The entire affair somewhat started when Abraham Lincoln supported the ban of black slavery in the states, and the South lost their minds. They claimed that this suggestion would be their doom and a violation of their rights. At this time, Lincoln was not president, but that changed soon when he received a majority in electoral votes. Now the South really lost it. 7 of the southern states with the majority of a slave population and cotton-based economies declared secession. But really, why did these states become so angry? Of course, the main reason was slavery. These states feared repetition of the horrors of Santo Domingo, where a successful revolt of a black slave resulted in a mass slaughter of white folks. And the economies depended on the exploitation of slaves entirely. The South was known as the Cotton King and exported to major industrial hubs, like England. The dispute between territories would determine the future of slavery in the entire world. But there were some other reasons for the secession, like territorial crisis. At the time, America was acting a bit like England of the past and taking over land, left, right, and center through negotiation or plain force. The new lands conquered were distributed equally between the anti- and pro-slavery states until this new development of abolishing slavery altogether. Now, people began to argue whether the slaveholders really deserved more space to abuse their slaves. What happened next really shows the spirit of America: dispute over the Constitution. Southern states claimed that all the states had the right to separate from the Union since they came into it voluntarily. Northern states claimed that the Founding Fathers had formed a perpetual union, meaning that it would never change. So really, there were a multitude of reasons why the North and South should separate. But Abraham Lincoln insisted that the Union was absolutely perfect, and that if the states protested, then there would be dire consequences. The South became angry at this and gave up their seats at the Congress. Because of this, Republicans were free to do as they pleased. A bill that could have prevented secession, as it stated that the northern side would ban slavery and grant slaveholder rights to the South side, was rejected by Lincoln and his supporters. At this time, the southern states had a hold on their land and their slaves as they seceded to form a confederacy, while the northern states called themselves the Union. But some federally owned buildings were still in their land, and the president was keen to gain control of these buildings, like Fort Sumter. The newly separated states offered to pay for these buildings and even form a peace treaty with the Union. However, President Lincoln refused to bend his demands and proceeded to reject all efforts of negotiation. The previously mentioned Fort Sumter is located in South Carolina, the control center of the secession. Here is where the blood began to spill. The fort was protected by armies from the north, which really irked the Confederacy. The president of the Confederacy, Davis, decided to attack and take over the fort before the relief team could show up from the north. As with all wars, one side had made a huge mistake. The North had assumed that only a small portion of the South supported the secession. Turns out, almost all of them supported this development and were itching to get their hands on the Army of the North. The army defending Fort Sumter continually received less aid than needed, and eventually the neighboring states also declared secession and joined the seemingly winning side. At this point, The entire land of America was in disarray. Some states declared that they were neutral, some launched guerrilla wars, and some were just confused. This confusion is actually what made the American Civil War to become some of the most ferocious and fiercely fought wars. All of its battles are marked by their high intensity and incredible number of casualties. The Battle of Fort Sumter was only the beginning. Soon troops were called on all fronts. The newly separated states had 100,000 men at their disposal. The Union had similar numbers. And they weren't able to train them, so a part of these troops went to waste. Then a similar but opposite problem came into play. Young men decided that their enthusiasm had faded, and they wouldn't want anything to do with dying in a war started by old men. The inflow of troops was lowered significantly. Then both the opposing parties started sending out war drafts, and even though it was technically forcing people to die, that is, murder, this would cause the tiny troops of America to become one of the most efficient and strong armies of that time. These armies even included women and ex-slaves, as well as people who were eager to kill, die, and fight for 4 years. Why were they willing to do that? For the same reason that all wars fought: for honor and for rights. The North wanted the rights of the people, and the South also wanted the rights of the people, except they didn't consider slaves to be actual people. This entire back and forth dramatics of human rights brewed up and would soon spill over the people of America. But first, this war will terrorize the sea. Why do you think America took its fight out in the water? Comment down below, and we will pin the best one. More will be revealed in part 2 of this 3-part series. Don't forget to like this video and share it with all your friends. Make sure you subscribe to our channel to find out how this war suddenly became huge enough to capture the entire world's attention. We will see you next time on Explained. Tune in.